Good afternoon, Anne Arundel County. Good afternoon, America. Welcome to, I believe, the 38th episode of Promoting Don't Get Fooled Again with Class. I'm your host, Anthony Bynum. The name of our production company is the Glen Burnie Players. These are exciting times here in Anne Arundel County, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few moments. So as far as getting things started, we're going to have a couple of quick shout outs here. You have our affiliates. So there's Amherst Media there in Amherst, Massachusetts. But also there is Greenbelt Access or Greenbelt Cable Access. They're located here in PG County, Maryland. So I want to say hello to both our affiliates. Now, as far as this week's episode is concerned, I want to give credit where credit is due. So as usual, we've looked into the fine resources of Wikipedia, but also they have a new source. It is the SevernaParkVoice.com, followed by the Poem Farm. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off by going to our screen share. Nichelle Nichols. Yes, the woman known as Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek. But before we get to that, let's just do a little background work first. So Nichelle was actually born Grace Dell Nichols in a place called Robbins, Illinois. She was born 12/28/1932, and she passed away 7/30 of 22. Her father was a Samuel Nichols, her mom a Lisa, I believe, Nichols, and she had siblings. Now, her father did factory work, but he was also elected mayor of his town, Robbins, Illinois, and he was also the town's uh, uh, magistrate, or yeah, he also became a magistrate for the town. So he's quite an accomplished individual. And it's more, if you can see when you look at the trajectory of her career, you see that there was something there pushing her, So let's start off with her name. Like I said, she was born Grace Dell, but she didn't like the name. And she asked her parents if she could change it, and they said it was okay. So somewhere in there, they came up with Nichelle. I don't know if mom suggested that, I don't know. But at age 12, she was studying at the Chicago Ballet. She was studying dance. Sounds like some other person we chronicled at some point in time who studied dance early on. She liked to sing. She liked to dance. She liked to perform for individuals. Early on, she was working for folks like Duke Ellington's band and Lionel Hampton of the vibraphone. Um, and somewhere in 1959, she got another break working with a play, the great play Porky and Bess. And she did another play after that in the Chicago area. It didn't do very well, but someone recognized her skills and her talents. That somebody was a man named Hugh Hefner. Now, Hugh Hefner and his Playboy Club were very, very popular in those days. All the who's who's went out to there, okay? Um, and he recognized her and he brought her in. She sang at his club. That led to a chance to play Carmen, another diva role. So this woman was very, very talented and very, very skilled. These are all the late 50s, early 60s. In fact, her first work with Gene Roddenberry was on his first series, Lieutenant. That was 1964. And she played in an episode called Sit It Right. So she's making bones for herself as a dramatic actress. So let's get down to it, right? This is about Star Trek, right? So um, towards the end of that first season, she wasn't in the pilot of Star Trek. We all know the story had to be reworked, uh, characters changed, but she was in the second cast, so to speak. And the first season, she was a little disappointed. She thought it would be a bigger place for her, but we all know how Star Trek works, right? It was about Kirk and Spock and a lot of bones. Sometimes Scotty was in there pretty strong, but the other three main characters, Nichelle Nichols, who was Uhura, George Takei, who was Sulu, Lieutenant Sulu, and Chekhov, get his real name, who's an ensign, they got lesser lines. They got fewer chances to show what they could do. We all know that. Well, so she was going to leave in the first season. And she told Gene what she got an opportunity for a spot on Broadway, excuse me, for play on Broadway. And she was going to take it. Matter of fact, she did take it. She went to tell Gene Roddenberry, and he tried to convince her, and this was on a Friday, he tried to convince her not to take it and stay with us. But in the end, he said, well, look, just think about it over the weekend. And if you go, you know, you still feel the same way, then of course I'll bless it. She says, okay. That same weekend, she's scheduled to do a appearance at an NAACP banquet. So she's in her dressing room, and like I said, she's got a fan base now. She's got a fan base. She's in her dressing room, and there's a knock on the door, and someone says, well, Miss Nichols, there's a fan to see you. She's like, okay, well, you know, anything for the show. So she opens the door, and then she gazes across the room, and she sees Dr. Martin Luther King. And she says to herself, well, whoever the fan is, he's just going to have to wait. Well, it turns out he was the fan. And they embraced and they talked. And she shared with him that she was going to leave the show. And he cut her off right at the knees. He said, you mustn't. Because when you're on that television, people are seeing someone who is intelligent, someone of high quality and of beauty. He confided in her that that show was the only television show that he and Coretta let his kids watch. The only one, the only one. So that's saying a lot. So she obviously stayed with the franchise. It's a good thing she did. It's a good thing she did. In fact, between 1977 and 2015, she actually volunteered for NASA as a way to try to bring in more diversity into the space program, more Black scientists. I think Mae Jefferson Jameson, Dr. Jameson, I believe that's her name, credits her as being one of the things that compelled her to get into of the field of science. So it's quite a story. I relate to the story in that when I was a little boy, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that, I only recall 3 Black women working in television. That was Nichols, but also there was Gail Fisher, who worked on Mannix. Eventually, we're going to circle back to her, and Diana Carroll, who had her own television show. So yeah, she's a groundbreaker. There's more that you can talk about Nichelle Nichols. There's more, but her defining role, her defining contribution to art in America is Lieutenant Uhura. That's just, it just is. So I'm going to go prepare for the next segment. The next, there we go. And I'm going to stop sharing. All right, we always like to talk about something of consequence regarding Anne Arundel County. This week, we pulled an article right from the SevernaParkVoice.com. It talks about the history of Severna Park. So I'm just going to read it. It's written by a man named Dan Giles, who must work for the publication in some way. So this is what it says. What was Severna Park really before it evolved into a great family-oriented suburb that it is today? With much help from local resident and historian Scott Jay, and now vicariously through Dan Giles, Scott Jay and his collection of books and documents, this first piece in a summer series of summer articles will highlight the first 300 years of Severna Park's development as a community. According to Jay, and again, that's Scott Jay, the discovery of arrowheads within the region indicates that human settlements were present in this area as far back as 10,000 years. In 1649, now there's a lot that happened between 10,000 years ago and 1649, just as a spoiler alert. But in 1649, a group of Puritans from Nansemond, Virginia, became the first European colonists to permanently settle the area. They established Annapolis first, which was originally called Providence, at the mouth of the river because the native Susquehanna tribe controlled the inland regions. If one were to walk about the footprint of modern-day Severna Park during this period, they would find open spaces dominated by well-spaced trees, crossed by only native American trails, and the occasional deer, black bear, or mountain lion. What are they saying? Wizard of Oz, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. A horse and buggy could easily navigate through the area, but the Puritans preferred to travel by water because they felt it was safer. Well, for the reasons we just mentioned. The first major milestone for Severna Park came in 1670, when the area stretching from today's Joyce Lane to Shipley Choice was divided into 5 different land grafts. In 1680, Christopher Randall purchased one of these grants, consisting of 102 acres, and imaginally dubbed it Randall's Grant. In 1856, owner George Linstead divided his grant into 3 parts, one of which would become the community of Linstead, and the other 2 which would become Old Severna Park. So it's interesting that how these things happen, right? The crown would bequeath land to a faithful servant, and that servant who would divide it up. And that's how it all came to be. You know, America's a big chunk of real estate. It's a big chunk of real estate. In 1898, a farmhouse in Linstead was purchased at auction by the Riggs brothers, 2 wealthy fraternal twins from Baltimore who used it for upper-class entertaining. Governor Ritchie himself was known to occasionally stop at the Riggs' lively social galas. Governor Ritchie, where do we know that name? Well, obviously, he was a governor of Maryland, and obviously, he was well known enough to have a highway named after him, Route 2, right? That's Ritchie Highway. So there's more that we could read here, but you get the gist. Severna Park, you get the gist. Okay, I'm gonna get one more little bit of tea here. My throat is just a little scratchy, folks. Thank you for indulging. We always like to end on either a speech, a poem, or some sort of words of importance. This year, we haven't had a lot of snow. Matter of fact, we haven't had any real snow. But there is a thing called the winter solstice. It happens a little later in the year. But the poem I'm going to read, which comes from the poem Farm, is called Winter Solstice. It was written by Amy Ludwig van der Water. Here's how it goes. Tonight, you will find me snug in colorful wool, staring into a solstice sky, so speckled with cold night stars. You will see me raised, my mittened hands, as if to hug the hidden sun. You will hear me softly whisper, welcome back. Each new day now brings more light. I feel this truth inside my warming bones. And that was again called Winter Solstice. It was written by Amy Ludwig van der Water. So this has been fun. This has been fun. I've been doing a little bit of editing for Maryland Men of the Cloth. I do have some of it back. So we are working on that. I hope to get that out to everyone as soon as possible. So until next time, for promoting Don't Get Fooled Again with Class, I'm your host, Anthony Bynum. For everyone here at the Glen Burnie Players, bye-bye.